Thanks for joining us here on Politics on Tap, a casual conversation about politics. Today I'm joined by Dorothy Rothrock, the Vice President for Governmental Relations at the California Manufacturing and Technology Association, and my longtime friend A.G. Block, who's the Associate Director of the University of California in Sacramento and the former editor of the California Journal. We were just sitting here talking beforehand about the economy, and so what's your members' take on the economy?
Very uncertain. I think there's a lot of real great concern about California. We've done some analysis of the rates of investment in the state by manufacturers in the last few years, and we're seeing that while we have about 10 or 11% of the workforce in the country for manufacturing, we're only getting about 2% of the investment. So we're not getting our fair share.
Here's the
of what's
softball
going
pitch
on.
across the plate. Why is that, Dorothy? Yeah.
Well, there's all sorts of policies that have been adopted in the last decade or so, and even before that, that create higher costs of doing business here. But more importantly, just a very uncertain and often hostile regulatory environment. So companies can't really judge when they're deciding to make hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investment whether that's going to pay off over the next 10, 20 years. It's a very long-term view that manufacturers have, and if the regulatory environment is unstable or uncertain, and you don't trust that things are going to be done in a predictable or business-sensitive way, then you put a lot of question marks in your spreadsheet in terms of cost of workers' comp or energy or taxes, and it becomes too risky, too many unknowns, you'd go somewhere else.
You've had some time with Jerry Brown as governor now, as opposed to previous.
Are you the interviewer here? Now you the
We both
We're having a conversation.
Okay.
We both are. Well,
It's a tag team thing.
Yeah, I was curious if there's
like
been
wrestling.
if there's been a change, if you've noticed any difference.
Too soon to tell. Too soon to tell, really.
I hear all the time, you know, it's the regulations and it's this and it's that. I mean,
Is it frustrating to you that you hear it
it's
that
not
way?
frustrating to me. I mean, it must be frustrating to your members, but I mean, there always used to be sort of, when I worked for the Chronicle, it was like, okay, we need to have somebody cover, right, the bureaucracy, right? And they're all right. They were good. There was always going to be somebody who was going to cover the bureaucracy and do like investigative reporting. But I don't remember that. Did that ever happen?
Where they actually did the coverage?
Well, yeah, right. Because at some point, you know, the readers go, "I'm not interested in this."
It was the first casualty of the withdrawal of the News Corps from Sacramento, was that kind of coverage of the bureaucracy, where these kind of regulations come from, but they also come, I would assume, at the local level as much as state government.
It's both. It's all layers, and the federal level as well. California has a habit, though, of wanting to do things different. They like to do, the state likes to do things first. We like to take the lead. We like to push the envelope. So more so than in other states, you've got federal level, a state level that's often different than the federal rule, and then you've got the local that's also unpredictable. I think probably the reason why it's difficult for the press to cover the agencies is the same reason we have trouble covering all the agencies. There's so many of them, and the workshops and the proceedings they're working on are so extensive and so detailed, you just can't spare the time.
Okay. So do you guys think that the impenetrability of some state agency and department websites is by design? Like the 11 gunmen on the grassy knoll part of me thinks that, like, the Air Board makes the website impossible for you to find anything so that you don't find out anything, you know?
Well, it's kind of a
Not
cottage.
to pick on the Air Board, but I'll let you do that.
Well, no. When I came over here, I'm not going to talk about my work because it's a small town.
Okay.
And I just can't really go there. I think the agencies have a huge job, and it's often not their fault that they can't be as transparent as open as they would like. That being said, it's incumbent upon them to do as good a job as they can. And actually, I think, and I've said before, I think the CARB does a better job than many others.
Okay, so this morning on the, whatever the ticker tape channel is that has the stock quotes on there, they were saying, they twittered, okay, so what would you do if you were the federal government to improve the economy? What would you do if you're the state of California to improve California's economy? It doesn't have to be one thing. But where would you start?
Well, what role would I have? Would I be governor or leader of the state senate, or what would my job be? Would I be dictator?
Sure.
Yeah, go.
Queen?
Go for it. Go for it.
Yes, my liege. Yeah.
Go for
Oh, I
dictator.
like that. I would bring all the heads of all the agencies before me, either in
Would they have
groups
to
or
kneel, or could they
individually.
sit around a table?
They would need to be lower. I would be higher, they would be lower. But I'd ask them, what's the most important thing you think you need to do in order to accomplish your mission, which is either air quality, public health, or whatever.
Don't they do that now?
No.
Sorry.
Okay. I'm the queen. Shh. Just don't speak until you're spoken to.
Yes.
And then I would say, okay, justify that. And okay, if that's the most important thing, why don't you just do that? And why don't you do nothing else? If that's really the most important thing. In other words, slow down and prioritize what's really important for those crucial public services that they're doing. I feel like the agencies are working too hard, too fast, doing too much, and the economy can't handle it. It's sort of it's an never-ending sort of onslaught of one thing after another, and I don't really think it's all as necessary.
Sorry, I'm speaking out of turn, I know, but Your Majesty. But I mean, a policy change. You mean, and then so the economy then has to react to that? You're saying it's happening so quickly. What's happening? What are the agencies doing that they're doing so fast? Because it seems contrary to my understanding of state government. But
they're doing a lot on a lot of different fronts, but they're not necessarily, not everything that they're doing is of super high importance. What I'm trying to get away from is the idea that, well, let's just put a moratorium on all regulations, which is a proposal at the federal level. You know, let's do a 3 or 4 year moratorium on all regulations because the economy needs to recover, and this is hurting business.
And those regulations are hampering job growth?
Right, right. There's sort of this blanket across the board, and I'm going, no, that's too aggressive. If you're gonna, even if you're queen and you can do anything, what you want is those agencies to justify what it is they are doing as pick their most important things, but then let the others slide. Put it off, go forward with what the most important things are. It'll force them to choose. Right now, it's just everything.
It seems to me, I'm fess up that I'm one of those folks that thinks government has to spend some more money here to stimulate the economy, to prompt job growth. And they talked a lot 2 years ago about the shovel-ready stuff. And I would try and figure out, okay, what's preventing that from happening? Are those projects out there? I think they are. And let's invest. Let's have government do whatever it can to get those projects off the ground, being built, whether they're in the private sector, whether they're in the public sector. You can't look around this state and not see
public works projects that need to be done. Yeah.
Yes, on your street, on my street.
Right.
We just drove I-80 or 580 down to Livermore over the weekend, and I'm not sure my shocks have recovered from that beating. So there's plenty to do.
80 up to Tahoe used to be that way until they just repaved it.
That's got to exist all over the state of California. Really, it's got to exist all over the country. Government's in a position to fund those kinds of projects, and those create jobs in the immediate. The regulations, the pulling back of regulations, it takes some time.
Go for it.
Is it the lack of jobs that's the problem, or is it the lack of private investment? Because what I read, what I hear is there's lots of money on the sidelines waiting to be invested in various ways.
I'm talking about the private because of the uncertainty that you're talking about.
Right. So you're talking about the government spending to kind of shore up jobs and make important.
Like there's 2 million Californians that don't have